Hello, my name is Tony. Imagine if Dirty Harry was really dirty. I don't mean corrupt on the take dirty, I mean dirty like a bundle of festering neurosis wrapped up in a wired, obsessive, seriously damaged personality with a moral compass not so much broken but smashed to smithereens and dropped down a bottomless sinkhole. Dirty like in frenziedly shooting a suspect stone cold dead, then hitting on and fucking his date immediately afterwards, leaving your partner to clean up the mess and file the report. Dirty like manipulative, self-serving, screw a hooker and not show too much emotion and regret when she winds up dead, mutilated and crucified as a result. Dirty like terrorize and torture a fellow officer for dealing drugs and running male prostitutes, push him to the edge, then blast him to death in his own home. Dirty like happily regale your 8-year-old daughter with alarming tales of criminal acts and nailing scumbags as bedtime stories, which eventually drives your wife to take the kid and run. Dirty like that. You're starting to get the picture, right? So I don't need to illustrate any further at this point. Suffice to say that James Woods plays Lloyd Hopkins, the cop of the title, and that's what he's like. He's not as extreme as, say, Harvey Keitel in Abel Ferrara's Bad Lieutenant or Denzel Washington in Training Day. He's not lining his pockets or sexually molesting anyone or addicted to illegal drugs. No, Lloyd doesn't need that stuff because he's got something else. He just needs to be a cop and catch or execute the bad guys. That's his mission, his objective, his fix, and all that matters to him. And he'll fuck up anyone or anything that gets in his way, in a heartbeat and without thinking twice. Cop was made and released in 1988, but it belongs in spirit to the early 70s, where it would have lined up comfortably alongside crime movies like Dirty Harry, The Laughing Policeman, Busting, Freebie and the Bean, and Prime Cut. It is a very dark, neo-noir police procedural in style and content, and a pleasing reminder that some people out there hadn't completely forgotten how to make movies like this, one of the last flickers of the old Hollywood maverick spirit. It's not without its flaws, and I'm certainly aware of them, but the good stuff about Cop easily outweighs the deficits. Here's the deal scenario-wise. Los Angeles homicide detective Lloyd Hopkins follows up on an anonymous call about a murder in a Hollywood apartment. When he arrives, he finds a young woman, Julie Nehemiah, bloody and butchered, hanging by her feet from the ceiling. Working the scene, he finds several newspapers with personal ads for sexual services circled in red and books of feminist literature, significantly one titled Rage in the Womb by Amanda Van Dyke. Van Dyke? Feminist? The surname here might or might not be a double entendre, so already there's more than enough content for someone in the here and now to be offended on their own or someone else's behalf. And if that is the case, and you're a wokey-pokey snowflake type, then save yourself some time and torment and switch off now. It will only get worse for you, child. The adults may continue, naturally. Back at the station, Hopkins opens a letter to Julie, which has been written in human blood. It's a short, utterly terrible poem, but makes mention of all the rest, which starts our boy Lloyd thinking that the chandelier swinger may not have been the first. Painstakingly reviewing past cases of unsolved female homicides over a 15-year period, Lloyd becomes convinced a serial killer is operational. All he has to do is convince his commanding officer of it. Problem being, Captain Gaffney, Raymond Barry, is a born-again Christian, harbouring barely concealed distaste and animosity towards Hopkins. Not gonna be easy. Hopkins tracks down the owner of the sexual services newspaper ads Julie had circled in red. She's one Joni Pratt, Randy Brooks, an ex-actress who sells drugs, works as an escort, and arranges swinger parties. She informs him that Julie was writing a book about the sex trade and wanted to attend one of her parties as an observer, purely for research purposes. I must remember to hold that excuse in reserve. Could come in handy one day. Thinking that one of Joni's clients might be the killer, Hopkins asks her for a list with contact details. He visits her apartment to get it, and the two have intense sex in the kitchen whilst the bacon burns on the hob. But someone else is also there, voyeuristically watching. After narrowing the list of possible previous victims down, Lloyd interviews Deputy Sheriff Delbert Whitey Haynes, Charles Hayde, about two female suicides that occurred on his beat on the same date exactly a year apart. Sensing that something's not quite right about Whitey, an increasingly common phenomenon these days I find, Hopkins breaks into his house and discovers he's being wiretapped and recorded dealing drugs and running male prostitutes. A dirty cop in the traditional sense who is under surveillance by someone. Short of leads, Lloyd begins hitting on feminist bookstores, as he believes there is a link between feminist literature and the murder. He happens on a shop owned by Kathleen McCarthy, Leslie Ann Warren, a very defensive, hostile, and romantically delusional feminist. She's got Rage in the Womb for sale, and who wouldn't fancy a bit of that, eh? Despite her antipathy towards men, Hopkins easily manipulates her into being his date for a party given by his ex-partner Dutch, Charles Durning, to celebrate the older man's promotion. Back at McCarthy's place, she tells him of how she was gang raped in high school by a bunch of guys who took issue with her feminist poetry club. They believe she was a snotty, high and mighty elitist who needed taking down a peg or two. Then her delusional romanticism kicks in as she further reveals to Lloyd that every year she received flowers and a poem from some anonymous admirer. When she leaves the room to take a bath and smoke a joint to relax herself in preparation for a horizontal rumba with Lloyd, a prospect that doesn't exactly fill him with intoxicating desire, he flips through her high school yearbook and finds a picture of Whitey and a guy named Birdman. Lloyd knows Birdman is now a male prostitute and Whitey's partner in crime because he heard his name mentioned on the surveillance tape. Birdman winds up dead in a motel room, a motto from McCarthy's yearbook written in blood on the mirror. Lloyd confronts Whitey at his house, threatening to shoot him in the head until he confesses at gunpoint that he and Birdman were participants in McCarthy's gang rape. Whitey pulls a shotgun on Lloyd, but Lloyd blows him away. Oops. Dutch advises Lloyd to keep out of sight. He's killed a fellow officer and McCarthy has lodged a complaint about him breaking into her place, which he did, ransacking her treasure chest of pressed flowers and poems, all conveniently dated. Joni invites him over for sex, but when he gets there, he finds her butchered, crucified in the kitchen where they last did the dirty deed. Dinner's ready, scrawled on the blood-drenched wall. In addition, a picture of Lloyd and Joni getting it on has been submitted to Gaffney, and it sort of offended his high moral Christian sensibilities. It's obvious that the murderer is responsible for the amateur porn pic, but Gaffney would rather suspend Hopkins than see reason. Just as McCarthy is being interviewed by Lloyd and Dutch, she's agreed to look through the yearbook and help cross-reference potential candidates with a list of suspects. Gaffney barges in and suspends Hopkins. This gives McCarthy time to duck out and get to a payphone, where she contacts and warns Bobby Franco, Stephen Lambert, who was in her high school poetry club, that he's on the list of suspects and that Hopkins is dangerous and on his case. Lloyd turns up and grabs the phone, and when McCarthy hears Franco threaten him, she realizes in horror that not only is he her anonymous paramour, but also the serial killer, and she's just tipped him off. What a foolish feminist she is. Or, to put it another way, total fucking dingbat twat-skull moron. Lloyd agrees to meet Franco at the high school for a climactic showdown, which takes the form of a shootout in the gym. How will it end? More on that later. Cop was based on the novel Blood on the Moon by esteemed American crime writer James Ellroy. Reportedly, Ellroy wasn't happy with the screen version, but he was no doubt happy enough to take the money for the rights. So suck it up and quit whining, Jim. You got paid. You didn't have to sell. Live with the choices you make. The film was undoubtedly a vehicle for James Woods, and he co-produced it with James B. Harris, who wrote the screenplay and directed. Harris had been a producer for Stanley Kubrick on The Killing, Paths of Glory, and Lolita. He'd worked with Woods on the cult prison drama Fast Walking in 1982. Although his script structure and direction on Cop are tight, stylish and confident, where it falters badly is in some of the dialogue, which borders on atrocious. In fact, this is odd, because elsewhere, especially in the final scenes, it's quite electrifying. So, dialogue-wise, fair to say, it's uneven, and as such is one of the film's failings. The saving grace, though, is James Woods. His performance as Lloyd Hopkins is dynamic, powerful stuff, and showcases some of his best screen work. He delivers even the most hackneyed and clunky lines with razor-sharp conviction and edgy panache. Upshot is, Hopkins is more than a little nuts. He doesn't just shoot the suspected robber he and Dutch confront early on a mere once or twice, he empties his police revolver into him until he's down with zero chance of ever getting back up again. He's not distracted or diverted by anything. He has one goal and nothing else matters, no deviation. Anything or anyone who gets in the way is just so much collateral damage, casually dismissed as such. Yet all credit to Woods, he manages to make this potentially dislikable and wholly selfish character utterly compelling, riveting to watch, and a person to identify with and root for. Support-wise, Charles Durning is excellent as Dutch, Hopkins' long-suffering friend and partner, and Leslie Ann Warren wrestles gamely with an unflattering role as the pseudo-intellectual mock-feminist who is really a shallow airhead with an inflated opinion of herself. McCarthy should be a complex and sympathetic victim, someone who is broken and hiding behind a facade of sparky, bogus man-hating superiority, but the role is overbaked and underwritten, and a little too much of a cliche to be genuinely convincing. It might just be me, but I felt mostly irritated by her and her hollow principles, and was secretly glad when she betrayed herself and all she professed to stand for. Mean of me, perhaps, but the way she was written left little choice, and at the risk of sounding even more chauvinistic, to get this right needed someone more clued in about writing women sensitively. A woman, perhaps. Shit, that's done it. You'd think I was begging to be cancelled. Whilst we're on the subject though, it does appear on some levels a deeply sexist film. When Lloyd empties his gun into her criminal date, the woman, an eye-popping pneumatic bimbo who can't even remember the name of her dead hookup for the evening.
Is what's-his-name dead?
What's his name? You don't know his name?
Willingly lets Hopkins escort her home for sex. Joni Pratt, an escort and hooker, lets Hopkins routinely have sex with her in the kitchen for free, then invites him back for round 2, but ends up slaughtered instead. McCarthy is going to have sex with Lloyd, compromising her feminist principles, before he unceremoniously runs out on her after stringing her along for information. Most of the victims are women, and although we don't witness their deaths, the camera lingers salaciously on the aftermath of the physical destruction wrought upon their bodies by the killer. Hopkins' wife is portrayed as the weak, unreasonable one when she berates him about his attitude towards their daughter and leaves him. Seems a rational choice to me. And the conversation Lloyd has with Dutch about the nature of the female of the species and their inability to fly high like men do in the execution of their manly policeman duties, for instance, isn't intended to be satirical, but a valid cultural observation. Now, me being a heterosexual male person with a seemingly endless capacity for compartmentalization and rationalization, I don't mind any of this at all, because I know it's a fiction, and I can tell the difference. Trust me, it's a gift, rarer by the day. But some may be less forgiving of made-up stuff and may take it as a deadly serious mandate. I can only say, it's not real. No, it really isn't. But if you think it's gonna get your goat, keep your goat tethered at home and unexposed. Sorted. Cinematography by Steve Dubin has that slick 80s pop video gleam and shine vibrance going for it, and the score by Michael Colombier is a very 80s orientated synth and strings workout. I can just about live with it. Then there's the best part of the entire film, coming in just where it should be, the ending, the payoff. For the benefit of those who haven't seen it, I won't spoil. Just say that it's one of the most satisfying conclusions to any police flick ever. Marvelous, wonderful, stunning. The perfect punchline after a lead-in by a brilliantly composed, suspenseful and tense gunfight in a high school gymnasium. It's a classic. Worth the price of admission, as they say. Whoever they are. Cop is a hard-boiled, hard-nosed, well-crafted neo-noir serial killer flick with a singularly intriguing central character, brilliantly brought to life by James Wood at his neurotic, electrically wired best. It reminds of all those classic 70s cop thrillers some of us know well and love to death. It's not politically correct, like that's a problem, and the main flaw is some of the poorly scripted dialogue. But overall, it's a cracking detective flick for the discerning viewer, and one that I personally appreciate greatly and honestly recommend. A must-see for fans of such things, so if that's what you are, you must see it. Thank you as always for your time and attention. Same old spiel about liking, not liking, commenting and subscribing if you feel you have something to contribute. Anything is gratefully accepted, so don't be shy. Next one soon, pilgrims.